Hello, everybody. Doc Hydra here. March 14th, 2026. I'm going to get into something in just a second here because somebody had a question about the nomogram that I did. Which, this is from yesterday, and how I had the 2150 BTU per foot per second, but was a little on the confused side as to how I got the total fire line thermal capacity. But I'll get to that in a second. So today, what I want to talk about has something with everything that's going around with the new U.S. Wildland Fire Service. Um, a lot of the people that I've talked to, they're all kind of saying the same thing, kind of like, what are we really doing? Well, basically, if you're in the government, it's pretty much ops normal. If you're with the BLM, the Park Service, Fish and Feathers, Forest Service, you've pretty much been instructed to maintain the status quo, go the way that you've been, which is fine, okay? But something that was also brought up, and I thought I would do this section of the video, is like, why my logo that you see right here? Why did I choose those particular things? And I was reminded of this because when we were getting emails about the U.S. Wildland Fire Service logo contest, it struck something to me as like interesting because a logo is supposed to convey, okay, your professional skill sets or the professionalism that you're trying to uh, portray, as well as the trust in the community or the public, especially if it's a government agency. So if it's a government agency, okay, it usually is designed to establish trust and credibility, a consistent professional visual identity signals is what it's conveying, dependability, and then competence to the public. Okay, so that word competence, that to me strikes a special note. Okay, and then logos help citizens easily identify which agency or entity is involved, and then the logos often include elements such as eagles or shields, like with the government or whatever, that represent the specific agency's role, heritage, core values, etc., etc. So now, so if we get off of that element for a minute and we focus back on the one that I chose. Because I even had a couple of people like, oh well, they just look, it's like, oh well, that's kind of a cool logo, Moylan. It's like, so what made you choose this? And that's what I wanted to talk about because I think it's critical when we look at agencies today and how we fight fire. Forest Service, BLM, Park Service, BIA, et cetera, et cetera. We need to really slow down a little bit and think about what was the intended mission of the agency back in the day when it was created. Okay, and I'll get to that in a second. So it's like, so here, the fire engine, okay, the fire apparatus, okay. So the Type 3, the Type 4 commonly used, okay. So everybody already has an idea of what the hell that is for. Okay, carries water, carries your crew members. You can go make your initial attack, etc. I got it. Okay. Helicopters we use for hell attack, carrying buckets, medevacs, uh, forward-looking infrared. We do a lot of stuff for mapping fires, etc., etc. Then obviously the fixed wing between seats, lats, and VLATs. That's kind of a no-brainer. Carries either well, most of your fixed wing outside of seats are pretty much, they've got this mentality of retardant only. They think retardant's the end all be all. There's lots of problems with retardants from a thermal property standpoint of retardant. I think I've shown that. I may go into a little bit more detail as to why it's so easy for this stuff to break down at a temperature threshold, because retardant is critically temperature threshold dependent on what we do. And then the dozers. So the dozers, yeah, they don't carry water, but they remove surface vegetation and fuel out of the way. So anything that, if anybody's paid any attention to what I do, dozers, removing fuel is a direct equivalent of BTU absorption. Fuel removal is a direct equivalent to BTU absorption. So, and then the gear set typically is used in engineering for engineers to symbolize, calculations, arithmetic, design process and phases. And then with the flame in the center of it, that is basically designed as like, hey, we are going to engineer slash design a solution to a thermally generated problem on our fire. So that's why I chose that. The bridge here, the physical bridge, is literally just what it looks like. It's supposed to represent a bridge is bridging between 2 points of something that was otherwise unreachable or unattainable, that now, if we do a certain process, we can now reach a successful outcome. And that was the purpose of the bridge. And then FBAN and Ops, that's fire behavior analysts, bridging the gap between fire behavior analysts to the operation side. The operation side sits here. We'll have a lot of times on your larger files, you have fire behavior analysts that will go out. They'll work on the nomograms. They'll do their calculations, and they'll say, yep, the fire's got this intensity, it's moving at this rate of spread, and the flame lengths we can expect to be somewhere within this. It's not 100%, it's just designed to get you a quick and dirty baseline vital statistic, if you will, for those EMTs out there that think that way. We're going to start here, and then we're going to work on a system for this, and then based upon what we deliver, we're going to adjust to see if our patient gets better or worse. In this case, our patient slash enemy is the fire. So we want to make the fire better, okay, and our enemy better for us by basically killing it, snuffing it out. And how we do that is we once again go back to our baseline vital, come up with whatever intensity figure that tells us it's doing, and that rate of spread. And that rate of spread is often mismatched. It will go out in chains per hour, but we want to convert it to feet per second because the fire is generating its heat in BTU per second per foot. So we want to match all this stuff and set it up so that it can go the way that we want it to go. Well, then once you get that, you then want to turn around and say, hey, which one of these do I need? Well, which one of these you need goes back to what is the fire intensity. But you have to understand is that when you use these, okay, or Behave Plus software, and it's giving you a BTU per foot per second or BTU per second per foot, it's the same thing, but they just have it rearranged. The critical thing to think about is that it's only giving you a rate of spread in chains per hour. Convert that to feet per second, and then once you get that, the BTU, and I'm going to show this to you. So let's say that we've got a fire here that is showing, 1,850 BTU per second per foot. Okay, so if we've got that, and let's say the rate of spread is, we'll say 1.75 feet per second. So you have to picture this. So it is for a 1.75 by 1 foot area. That's what this figure is pertaining to, a 1.75 times 1 foot area, period. In all of it, it could be 20,000 BTU per foot per second. It's going to be basically whatever that rate of spread is in feet per second times 1 foot. That is all the intensity. How you get the total fire intensity is you take this number, which is your active width, and then you multiply it by the fire length. Okay, so that's basically where that is. So again, going back to logos, if we get back on track here and then go back to our logos, okay, keeping this in context, like I was talking about before, is like, so what was the purpose of the logo? So if you look at the logos, there's nothing in this logo that signifies what the mission statement of wildfire suppression slash extinguishment is. That's not what the agency was designed for back in 1905. It was created to manage, protect, and provide sustainable use of the nation's forest reserves. Okay? Its purpose was to manage natural resources for long-term health and public benefit, balancing conservation with the greatest good of the greatest number. Okay? So its logo pretty much reflects that. Doesn't have anything to do with fire suppression, even though that's what they did. Then in 1916, the National Park Service Organic Act was created the National Park Service to conserve scenery, natural historic objects, and wildlife within federal parks. Again, the logo reflects that. Does not reflect wildland fire suppression. Then the BLM, Bureau of Land Management, was created in 1946 to consolidate the General Land Office and the U.S. Grazing Service and its primary purpose was to unify the management of public land. So unifying, okay, under the Department of the Interior, okay. Shifting focus from land disposal to long-term stewardship, sustainable multiple use management and regulation of grazing and mineral rights. Again, nothing in any one of these intended purposes of the agency was specific for wildland firefighting, okay, or suppression. So now that brings us back to what is the purpose of the whole logo? What do you think the logo would be of the new U.S. Wildland Fire Service? I would personally be a little bit of a loss with what we got now because these logos that we got now are commensurate with what their intended purpose was. Okay, so I would imagine that a logo might be similar to something like what I have for my own business of training people how to use water effectively to bring a thermal effect to a fire. I would imagine it'd be something similar to this. You know, it's something that's going to convey an actual suppressive effort. Um, However, the problem that I see currently is that under our current federal system of standard training, we do not teach people how to bring a thermal effect to a fire. We teach them how to perform tasks based upon a task book. That's it. You go to a class, we are educating you on the principles of the task that you will be doing. We try to bring in elements, but in a lot of cases, when it comes to actual fighting fire through the thermodynamics of fire, because that's what fire is. Fire is a 100% thermodynamic problem. Out of everything else that we do, if you are bringing zero thermal effect with any of these apparatus, you are not going to be successful. At least not the way that you think you're going to be successful. The next generation task books, position task books that they have come up with is what they call performance based. Okay, performance based, if you really dig into it, is nothing more than we are going to have you consistently keep repeating until you get so efficient at that task, then we will check you off. That's essentially what it means. Then you have the educational based training, which is what I would prefer that people were at, that would focus more on this type of thing, because now you are learning, or you would be trained and educated in what the physical limitations and abilities and benefits that each one of these can bring to the table, and then trained on how to use them and rearrange them so that you can effect a thermal effect on a fire. As it stands right now, so let's look at it this way. So what thermal effect do you think that we bring to a fire right now? Just using LATs and VLATs that drop retardant. Zero. Zero. The policy that we have with retardant is that we are never going to drop it direct. At least that's what all of the air attacks and the National Technology Development Center has conveyed to me through various emails and whatnot. It's like And you see that in the years of experience of watching people go out there and they'll call in for a drop. And it is always along the periphery or the head of a fire well in advance. It is never direct. Well, if you start looking at the thermal decomposition rate and temperatures, and then what happens to retardant at each step, it gets pretty nasty. There's a video up on my firebridge.substack.com page, uh, and there's even a short on my Wildland Apparatus Engineer YouTube channel that shows what happens when fire burns through a retardant line. It gets pretty exothermic, and that's reflected in the 1972 report that was done by the Rocky Mountain Ranger Station. So at any rate, getting back on track is that each one of these things carries with it a thermal effect. If you can match what these are doing to what your fire is doing, you'll be successful. I've covered this before, but I thought it was important enough to bring it up again. So even in a lot of the books that or not a lot, in the two books I would, the quick reference and the lesson book, I include in it, and I will show it again, the thermal effect of Bambi buckets that the corporation that makes them puts it out. I have incorporated them all in a spreadsheet. I put it in there, and by gallons, liters, the weight of water in pounds and kilograms, and then the thermal capacity in both BTU and kilowatts for folks that are in certain metric countries. But if you understand what your fire is doing, and then you can look at the appropriate thermal capacity that you can deliver to the fire, you are now bringing a thermal effect to the fire. If you were just going out there and just lobbing seat and lat load of retardant after load after load after load, you're guaranteed nothing. So we really should be teaching people how to bring a thermal effect to the fire. So let's do something real quick here. So let's say that you're on a Type 3 engine that has 840 gallons of water. Okay. Do you have any idea how much BTU capacity your engine is carrying to this fire? So if we do this, and I'm going to be looking over here because I got my calculator. So let's say we have 840 gallons. So most people have no idea what the BTU capacity of a Type 3 engine is, or what the capacity of a 1-inch nozzle is, or a 1.5-inch nozzle, because this information doesn't exist in any of the training publications. And contrary to popular belief, this thing, it doesn't exist in that book either. It doesn't exist in the S490. So if we want to be successful at fire, we need to learn two things. We need to learn more about fire and how to bring a thermal effect, and we can only do that if we learn ourselves the properties of water. What are the thermal properties of water? That's what we need to be focusing on. So if we can do that, we can be 100 times more successful. So I'm not going to go into it right now because the video is already going on 19 minutes, 20 minutes here. So I'll just say that a 1-inch nozzle absorbs 3,120 BTU per second, and a 1.5-inch nozzle absorbs 9,366 BTU per second. If you understand the bucket size and this, you can determine what is going on with your aircraft and your resources, and then you can start sequentially stacking them up and whatnot. So now, to finish this video off, getting to that individual's question about how to determine the intensity of the fire line. So let's say that we have our fire line. So let's say this is our fire line, okay, right here. And let's say that our fire line is at 2 feet, okay? So what we'll do is I'm going to draw this with a ruler so it's a little bit cleaner here for you guys. Draw this at an angle. So now, let's say that this is 2 feet and that we have a fire intensity of the original nomogram that I did, which was 2150 BTU per foot per second. So we'll say it's, in fact, what I will do is I will draw a line straight down the center. So we have 2 feet, and then we'll say that we have 1,500 feet, which is, I believe, what I calculated or drew out on the last video. So if we have 2,150 BTU per second per foot, and our rate of spread is 2 feet, okay, per second, then we take the 2150, which is for those 2 feet, and we multiply it 50 BTU per second times 1,500 feet equals 3,225,000 BTU per second, and that's total fire intensity. So now, let me get this up here a little bit. So, in case it was cut off, your fire is traveling at, we'll say, this direction. So this 2 feet right here, that becomes your active width. Or another way to look at it, let's do it this way. It's easier for people to visualize if I'm drawing it this way. So if we have 2 feet, this is the direction of our fire, okay? And so what we'll have is we'll have typically a 1 foot, okay? So 1 foot by 2 foot, if that is how the nomogram tells you what your rate of spread is. So once you go from the chains per hour, multiply that by 66, which is 66 feet to a chain, so you're determining the total feet per hour. And then to get feet per second, take that number, divide it by 3,600, and that will tell you your rate of spread, okay, in feet per second. So for whatever reason, let's say that our forward rate of spread is 2 feet per second, okay, in that direction. And what we will do is say that our BTU per foot per second is 2,150 BTU per second per foot, okay? So this is critical to understand this. 1 foot, so if you got 1 foot tall, okay, by 2 feet wide, okay, however you want to work this up, it's going to be 1 foot by 2 feet. That is going to be the area that intensity is talking about on the nomogram. Again, you take that 2150 and you multiply it by your 1,500 feet equals a 3,225,000 BTU per second. So again, so 2 feet by 1,500 feet every second is chunking out. That's what that is telling you. And then from that, you can just take the 3,225,000 and divide it by the thermal capacity of a gallon of water. So if a gallon of water was 50 degrees Fahrenheit in temperature, it would absorb 9,366 BTU at 5,000 feet of altitude. Okay. At sea level, it's going to be a hair more. At 8,000 feet, it's going to be a hair less. It's not enough to worry about. It's only like the equivalent of about 180, 200,000 BTU either side of the aisle. It's not that critical um, when you're paying attention to water temperature. So I would just take this 3.2 million and divide it by the 9,366, and then that is going to tell you that you need 344 gallons. Now, because the fire is moving in a per second rate, it is telling you that if you wanted to extinguish this entirety of the fire line in 1 second, you would have to supply 344 gallons in that 1 second. If you cannot do that, it's not a problem to start breaking this up. Okay, so let me get my red pen here. So let's say that you wanted to break this up into quarters. Okay, so now you got 4 quarters, and so then what you would do is you would just say, okay, well, I need 1/4 of this 344. Okay, so now you only need 86 gallons for each quarter. So it might take you a little bit longer than that 1 second, obviously, to get put out, but it's going to be more manageable for you to do. You have to start thinking this way. You're not going to find this type of instruction in any of the NWCG courses that are out there. It doesn't exist, folks. It just doesn't exist. The only thing that comes close is the structure firefighting world, but they work with very predetermined limits of lengths of hose and where they go and whatnot. And even then, if you call for something that needs water, I think, like I said, it was like 15 gallons a second on one example. If you think about this on a per second rate, in order to get the equivalent of what you would need in a pump, that 344 multiplied by 60 seconds, you would need a 21,000 gallon per minute pump to be able to do that. And then you'd have to have a way to have a source that could feed that. And then you'd have to have a way to get it to where it needed to go. This is where aircraft come in. So if you start thinking in caliber, so what holds 344 gallons? Well, probably a Type 1 helicopter, definitely a seat. The only limiting factor that you would need to think about now is going to be the fire line length. So when you're dropping a seat, yeah, you've got the water, but you may not get the distance, okay? Another problem that you could run into with the seat is the fact that when they gravity drop, okay, you're going to get if you've ever seen it in slow motion, it comes out, it's really slow, then you get a blob, and then it tapers off a little bit. If we had MAPS aircraft more available, which is a pressurized system, kind of like an aerial nozzle, you can more fine tune the width of that water drop to where when it comes over your fire here, you're getting more of the actual amount on the fire. So the method that I'm giving to you right now, yeah, that's a quick and dirty. You can use that, but you're probably going to need an extra aircraft or two, um, or maybe three. Whether you sequentially line them up, that's the best method that I suggest, um, is to stack them. Stack 3 or 4 back to back and drop sequentially. Get it in there, make it rain, and then on the last load, whatever, once you've got it calced out, drop an aircraft, a couple of seats, or maybe even a lat of retardant, and then get the added benefit of the moisture with the burn inhibitor on top of all that fresh wet. That's the best way to go. But you have to calc this out. It's a timed event, and you have to. There's a correction factor that I use. I'm not going to disclose that here, but there's a correction factor that I use to properly determine what you actually need to make up for the loss that's going to be outside of your fire line. So if you have a gravity aircraft, like let's say a BA 146, and it's dropping, you're going to get some residual stuff that as it drops, it's going to come out and widen. Well, if your fire is only, let's say, 5 feet wide in the center, you've got all of this wasted moisture on the outside that is not directly cooling that. So that lack of making contact with the direct fire actually may be required to be made up in an additional aircraft someplace else. Like I said, I thought about that, calc that out. That does exist. So Another way is to determine aircraft is to read the paper that I've got called Fire Nomogram Used for Greater Efficiency. It's on my Substack page. I'll leave the link in the description of the video as to where you can get it. And I even give the math to all this. I have sent this to everybody pretty much in the who's who of the fire world. And it's pretty much been crickets. There's been a few folks at the state level in various states that have went, okay, this is interesting. I think we're going to dig into this. In fact, I'm going to be teaching this, and I'm not ready to disclose where yet, but I will be teaching this to a state, maybe a couple of states this year, perhaps. Definitely next year. There's talk that they want to get their incident management team started on now, so I'll disclose that at a later time. At any rate, um, any more questions like this, definitely feel free to email me, like the last individual did, which is why I'm going over this today. And that's basically it. Remember, if you are bringing no thermal effect to a fire, you forfeit the expectancy that your fire will go out on your terms. And that's it, everybody. Have a good afternoon. Remember, engineers make it happen.